Off to the shop. Hope the trailer can haul that thing.
Well, our first competition was Speed Week in August, right before school started, and
there we go.
We had parts shipped to the salt flats to finish building the truck.
Tap the starter.
When I was sitting on the starting line, engine's running, I've got my hand on the shifter. I didn't know if it was gonna go when I put it in gear. You know, I didn't know if everything was just gonna fall apart. You know, it had never traveled under its own power.
Well, right now we have one project that's funded by CASE, and it's part of a larger sort of collaborative group of research scientists in the state that's exploring anaerobic digestion as a way to treat dairy waste. And so we're using that stream of nutrients as a way to grow algae that can be used for biofuels production. It's a way to sort of turn a problem into a solution or another sort of value-added product is the way that we oftentimes talk about it.
This is the kind of research we can all understand. A team of scientists in the lab trying to turn the very elements of dairy waste that pollute Idaho water into a viable source of energy and fuel. And a group of gung-ho students trying to take these biofuels to a whole new level.
Nobody's pushed vegetable oil as a fuel like this before.
It's the kind of applied research that the governor hopes will turbocharge Idaho's economy.
It's called simply IGEM, which stands for Idaho Global Entrepreneurial Mission. It's patterned on successful programs that we've seen in Utah and Virginia. IGEM involves industry entrepreneurs, higher education, the Idaho National Laboratory, and the Center for Advanced Energy Studies. Together, their focus will be on creating new value on our campuses that will, number one, help existing businesses grow, as well as nurturing the startup of new businesses, and create more jobs and opportunity for Idaho.
Dr. Ferris's algae research is already funded by that Energy Studies Center, referred to by its acronym, CASE. And Idaho's agricultural community has been working with the state's universities for years.
The face of higher ed is changing. You know, I think that doing research just for the sake of doing research is no longer necessarily good enough. I think there's a move afoot to say, take research money and what is the benefit of doing that research to society?
Therein lies the great opportunity that now a university can work with the private sector harmoniously to be able to create that.
One reason they're sure this could work is the CASE program itself.
CASE is a model where the three universities and the Idaho National Lab have come together, again, to sound almost like a broken record, to leverage talent and resources and so forth, to become the premier research entity for energy, nuclear energy type of research. And students benefit from that. I think Idaho benefits from that because when those folks get together, when the researchers from each of the universities and INL get together, they compete nationally for grants and they bring that federal money to Idaho. And that creates jobs. And it creates opportunities and jobs, whether it's graduate assistantships or whatever, for students, and helps pay their way through school.
It's already had at least one success story. Dr. Ferris's graduate research assistant recently won a 2-year EPA grant. It pays for her tuition and living expenses while she does something unique. Earns a master's degree from the University of Idaho while working in a lab at Boise State.
So I basically take classes through teleconferencing live. So the classes are up at Moscow and they get shipped down here so I can actually interact with the class, interact with the professor, ask questions, and it works out actually fairly well, surprisingly.
The benefit for Maxine, a graduate student, is that she has access to an engineering master's program that's not offered at Boise State. The benefit for me having her here is that she's here working in the lab and we have a project that's funding her research and funding her graduate curriculum. And so it's a nice wedding of those two opportunities. And it's really kind of stepping across these traditional university boundaries that are typically drawn around degree programs and that sort of thing. And just looking for what's the best fit for the research, what's the best fit for the student, and making that happen.
But what about the university's core mission? I asked Dr. Rudin if the push for commercially viable research could damage more traditional efforts.
There is still room for basic research at this university. I'm a firm believer that applied research is great, and developing intellectual property to send to market is great. But if you don't have the resources, i.e. applying for grants and getting money into the university to conduct basic research, that's the engine that drives the intellectual property and the ideas that are developed.
We don't want to lose the value of basic research, even when it seems esoteric, because oftentimes those things can lead to novel innovation that nobody would have found otherwise.
And in some ways, this has led to a new kind of teaching.
Personally, I think that, when you and I went to school, we had the 50-minute lecture. And that's how students were supposedly learned. I think those days are done. I think students learn by doing.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's one of the best ways to motivate students is to give them an opportunity to work towards something that's real and not just have it be, at least in a laboratory teaching environment, not just have it be some sort of cookbook recipe that, okay, here's step A, B, and B. I know what the outcome's going to be. You know what the outcome's going to be. You're just running through the motions. It's more interesting for me. It's more interesting for the students, and it's just a lot more fun than just a basic sort of cookbook approach.
The students working to build the world's fastest vegetable oil-driven truck would agree.
There is an engagement problem with the students that are coming into engineering, and without getting them involved early in something they can put their hands on and see, you tend to lose a good portion of them before they can even graduate or get into junior or senior classes.
That's Jen Niss. She's Greenspeed's crew chief.
She keeps us all in line and on task, basically.
This generation is hyper-productive and needs to be engaged constantly, and they need to see progress. And that's what something like this can offer.
Nobody illustrates this as much as these Greenspeed students themselves.
The countless failures that we had to overcome in our design, that's the stuff that you don't get in the classroom. On a hands-on experience, you learn to overcome failure.
School, it's usually a lot of theory, so you learn a formula, but when you apply it to the real world, it's not. We live in a non-ideal world, so that means if you try to apply it, there's always something that doesn't work, or there's always something else that you have to think of. And having worked in the industry for a couple of years, that's something I learned there, that it's not just, you can't just plan to do that in 5 minutes. It always takes a little longer. There's always something else that you have to think about.
And Boise State has embraced these guys.
Greenspeed.
President Bob Custer recognized them at his spring update this week.
Right here in Idaho.
The practical goal is to beat the petroleum-fueled diesel pickup record with vegetable oil as far as speed goes, and which is 215 miles an hour. The bigger idea is to get this turned into a permanent program at Boise State where students for years to come can actually rotate through, and specifically engineering students, but also business and marketing and artistic and graphic design. There's every aspect of business is present in this project.
So the goals at Greenspeed are long-term, but so are those in the IGEM program. Everybody, from Otter on down, says this is not going to be a quick fix for Idaho's economy.
I see it as a long-term strategy. To think that there will be an immediate return on investment on this money, year one or 6 months into it, that may be difficult to achieve.
And maybe it should take some time. I mean, you don't make $1 million overnight that's going to last, right? Unless you're just extremely lucky and win the lottery.
This will require a great deal of vision from the private sector, from the Senate and the House, and the governor's office obviously has already embraced this in a very much a leadership way to be able to say, this is what we need to do to be able to have Idaho compete long term.
And not surprisingly, those Greenspeed guys aren't waiting around.
The second time we went for World of Speed, the truck was tuned up and ready to go. We'd been on the dyno. We knew how much power it was making. We knew that it was going to stay together. So I was really excited about what was possible. And at a half a mile down the course, something happened. And all of a sudden there was smoke in the cab and fluid squirting onto the windshield. And so I got a little freaked out and had to pull over and shut it off. And the fire trucks came. You know, I pulled into the emergency lane. Fire trucks came, ambulance came, everybody came, you know, and it turned out that we cracked 2 cylinders in the engine. And so that was the end of our trip, because that was the very first run.
A few months later, another chance, this time in the alkali flats of the El Mirage Dry Lake in the Southern California desert.
That time, sitting on the starting line, once again, I was incredibly nervous because that was the first time the truck was going to travel on vegetable oil. And as far as we know, nobody else has pushed vegetable oil to this power level before. I was actually driving down the salt, kind of going, what's going on here? And it's really strange because it's pretty surreal, because there's nothing around, you know? I mean, the closest thing is miles away, so you have no frame of reference for how fast you're going. Like, what's the speed? What's the speed? How fast did we do it?
Yeah! Woo! Come on. Say it. Say it. Woo! Yeah!
He did. His first run clocked in at 139 miles per hour. The second, 155. Next year, they vow to hit 215. Pretty fast for fuel made to cook French fries. Now we've got Statesman business reporter Bill Roberts here to explain all this. Thanks, Bill, for taking the time. Now,
Sure.
Let's get right to the money. How much is Governor Otter proposing for IGEM?
Governor Otter wants to put $5 million into this program this year. $2 million would go to research at the universities, $2 million would go to K's, which we saw in the earlier piece that you did, and $1 million would be for kind of a business development fund to commercialize some of the research work that's being done.